P.S. There is also a little side note in here that is a question that people ask me sometimes, which is, should I work with a buyer's agent at all, or should I just go to a seller's agent directly if there is a house that I like and I see the listing? It's a really good question, and it really depends on you and your comfort level. So when I am selling a house, I have a fiduciary duty, so a legal duty to my seller in certain ways, to protect their information, to work in their interest, to maximize, not necessarily always the sale price, but to maximize the elements of the sale that are most important to that seller. If someone comes directly to me, for example, and they're like, hey Sarah, I love this house at 123 Broadway. That's probably a real address, but it's just an example here. I will say, that's amazing, great, love it, I can definitely help you. Just so you know, I represent the interests of the seller in this transaction, and if that makes you uncomfortable anywhere along the line, I can assign you to a different agent for negotiations. That being said, I have a legal obligation to share with you any material defects that I know of about the property, that I know of at the property. So basically that means if there's a hole in the roof, or if the structure is unsound, or if there's anything that the seller has shared with me is a problem with this building, I have to tell you. Now, do I have to tell you that the seller is going through an awful divorce and he has to sell the house over the next 2 weeks? No, I won't tell you that. That being said, I always speak with my sellers before about the amount of information that they are comfortable sharing, and a lot of the time there are useful details about the seller's position that can just help everybody understand what are the best terms that a buyer can put forward. What are the seller's priorities, basically? And so in general, I explain and I get the seller's permission to share information about things like, why are they selling? Oh, you're moving. So is it important for a buyer to have a short closing timeline? Or is it important for a buyer to have super solid financing that we know is going to work out so the seller can move their stuff, get moving on to where they're going, and not have to worry about a shaky closing? Things like that often offer particular insight that can help a buyer. And when I am the seller's agent, but also working with a buyer who's representing themselves, it can be not necessarily super advantageous, but nice to just not have to play a game of telephone through another agent to share that information. Obviously, working with a buyer's agent is also great, and I have no problem. And in general, I like other real estate agents because I understand their position, and it's people who have chosen to work in the same profession, who typically like buildings and like people and are cool, interesting, personable folks to talk to. So it's another good option, and it's totally fine if you feel like you really want to have someone who has your back and is representing you, even if they might have a little bit less access to information, or it puts you in more of a position of a game of telephone with the seller's agent. But that being said, the buyer's agent can also troop you around to a lot of different buildings. It's also the case if you approach a seller's agent at a particular building and that building doesn't work out, most of the time a seller's agent is willing to work with qualified buyers and take them around to other buildings, or at least assign that potential buyer to someone great who's working with their team. So it's another little question that I get asked now and then, just who represents who and how does this work with buyers and sellers agents. If you are super interested in that topic, let me know in the comments, and I will do another video about agency disclosure, which is basically just who represents who in a transaction. Another thing to note about the percentage that a seller is paying their agent. Oftentimes when the market is hot, and there's a lot of agents flooding into the market, thinking that real estate is an easy profession to be in. You poor creatures. There will be these sort of young and hungry agents who come in, and bless their hearts, they undercut themselves on commission in an attempt to get seller clients. So from a seller's point of view, if it's a seller who has more experience or feels confident that they can manage a transaction, it can be a great way to get a cheaper rate on an agent. I am always sort of worried about sellers who are making that decision, and this is not me trying to like pump people for more commission or higher commission. It's just something to be aware of, that particularly when the market is very hot and it's a seller's market, there can be a phenomenon of agents coming in with very low commission rates, willing to work for very little. And I think in that context, it is just the same as any other profession, right? So with experience comes an increase in compensation. So just like an entry-level employee at a company who is working to learn, these agents are embodying the same phenomenon where a lack of experience equates to a lower rate of compensation. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Different businesses, right? Every seller who is selling a building is a business, right? It's an entity. It has a legal structure. If it's an investment property in particular, all of that is probably formalized. But at any rate, every seller is hiring a human being to represent the interests of them as a business. So you can hire a super experienced, more expensive employee, agent kind of person, or you can hire a less expensive agent employee kind of person. And it's simply, I'm not trying to suggest that one or the other is better. I am just bringing attention to the fact that that is a phenomenon that exists in this profession and also other professions. That's just something to keep in mind and to be aware of when you are shopping for an agent. I hope it's helpful. Bye-bye.